De conversa boa, todo mundo quer participar. O antagonista também. Nossa equipe recebe convidados especiais para um bate-papo leve e divertido sobre as experiências de cada um. Podcast OA. Conversa boa de ver e ouvir.
Salve, salve, eu sou Felipe Moura Brasil, sejam todos bem-vindos a mais um episódio do Podcast OA, o programa semanal com convidados aqui da nossa equipe do portal O Antagonista. Toda segunda-feira às 19h30, um episódio novo no canal de YouTube de O Antagonista, um convidado presencial. Com ele, a gente aprofunda temas do debate público brasileiro e internacional. E hoje, o nosso convidado é internacional. É o Hillel Neuer, ele é diretor da ONG UN Watch, que vigia a ONU, que monitora a ONU. A gente acompanha o trabalho dele há muitos anos. Ele confronta representantes de ditaduras em reuniões, em conselho de direitos humanos. Ele desfaz certas narrativas a respeito do conflito em Gaza. Nós já mencionamos ele em diversos artigos, em diversas reportagens. Então a gente está muito honrado com a presença dele. Mr. Neuer, please welcome, and we are honored to have you here. It's a great pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's really great for me to be my first time in South America, in Brazil, in Sao Paulo. Great to be here. Thank you.
Mr. Neuer, I've been listening to your speeches. I've been watching your videos for more than 10 years, since I believe 2014, when there was a different kind of tensions between Israel and Hamas. And there was a phrase that you said that caught my attention back there when you were confronting representatives of dictatorships, saying to them that they are not pro-human rights, they are anti-Israel. And you keep saying this. You used this phrase a few days before this interview in a United Nations meeting. How did you come up with this sentence that I consider so precise, and why do you keep using it?
Well, why I use the phrase is because the pretense, the premise of these speeches is we care about human rights. You know, in 2007, I gave a speech that's the first time a speech that went viral because YouTube had just begun. This is March 2007. And the old Human Rights Commission, which was founded in 1946, and in the year June 2006, so 60 years later, they eliminated it and they created a new body. They replaced a new body called the Human Rights Council. And this was supposed to be new and improved. And Ban Ki-moon, the Secretary General, had the idea. He proposed it in February 2005. Said the old Human Rights Commission had become selective and politicized. And it was being used by members to shield their own records, violations, and those of their allies. So it was the opposite of what it was meant to be, was to promote human rights, help victims on the ground. He said we need to replace it with a new body where countries will have a solid record, the highest record of promoting human rights. And that happened in June 2006, where they created the new and improved Human Rights Council. And in that first year, all they did was to condemn Israel each month, one after the other. There had been the Second Lebanon War in the summer of 2006. They condemned Israel. There was an attack from Gaza. Israel responded. They condemned Israel. All they did was condemn Israel. And in March 2007, I took the floor and I called them out. And I talked about the dream of Eleanor Roosevelt, the founding chair of the Human Rights Commission. By the way, 1946, Eleanor Roosevelt, founding chair. She was the great humanitarian of the era. She used to write a newspaper article in America, syndicated in many newspapers, speaking out for widows, orphans, black people, people who didn't have a voice in the United States at that time. And she was quite appropriately the founding chair of the Human Rights Commission. And her vice chair was René Cassin, eminent legal philosopher. And I spoke in that speech in March 2007. I said the founder's dream after the Holocaust was to reaffirm the principle of human dignity. And I looked, I said, where are we today? And I enumerated how in the first year of this Human Rights Council, all they did was attack Israel, didn't say anything for people being slaughtered in Darfur or human rights abuses taking place in many other countries. And all of this was being done in the name of human rights, in the name of Palestinian human rights. And I said, actually, the dream of Eleanor Roosevelt was being turned into a nightmare. And they were actually, the butchers of Darfur were being given a place at the United Nations. Mm-hmm. And And I said the dream was being turned into a nightmare. And then the president of the Human Rights Council, he is not supposed to speak afterwards. He's supposed to thank me and next speech. That's all he does. He's sort of, in baseball, we have an umpire, or in soccer or in football, you might have a referee. I don't know what it's called. But really doesn't get involved. It just says, next speech. Not supposed to get involved. A referee would even be a strong term. But this time he said, for the first time, por primera vez, I will not thank the speaker. And he said, what you said is an insult to the memory of the founders. Well, I praised the memory. But and he said, if you ever give that speech again, you will be, it will be stricken from the record. It will be deleted. Now, why do I mention this? Is just to recall that the founding president was Eleanor Roosevelt, and in 2003, the chair was Muammar Gaddafi's regime of Libya. His ambassador. So Eleanor Roosevelt, 1946, 2003, Colonel Gaddafi's Libya. So that's the rise and fall of human rights at the United Nations. That's sort of the background.
Because you usually point out the killings and the civilian casualties in those regimes. Yes. Libya, Iran, Iraq,
Syria, 500,000 people.
Turkey.
Yeah. China put 1 million Muslims in camps. The Uyghurs put them in camps. In the former country formerly known as Zaire, now called Democratic Republic of Congo. Maybe 500,000 people were killed in recent years. And these things typically, so there's some exceptions, sometimes they address some of them, but typically they are ignored. And the worst dictatorships get elected to high bodies. So the Human Rights Council today includes China, 1.5 billion people, no human rights. China is a member of the Human Rights Council. As we are speaking now, China just finished voting for resolutions on human rights, in several cases condemning Israel as a human rights violator.
And why do you have a seat there in those meetings? If sometimes we feel that everybody hates you there, because when we speak, you're often answering their narratives and correcting their narratives.
Yeah, it's a good question. Why would they allow us to have a seat? Indeed, as you said, in the German newspaper Bild and in a Dutch magazine recently, I was called correctly the most hated man at the UN. When I walk in there, if looks could kill, I'd be dead 1,000 times. The stares that I get, certainly from the dictatorships, whether it's the China, Russia, Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, or from the Arab states, because we call out their human rights records, whether it's Syria, Libya, Jordan, Muslim states like Iran, Pakistan, we call out their abuses, but also that's sort of obvious. People would assume the dictatorships, the Islamic regimes who are pushing Islamophobia resolutions to prevent any criticism of radical Islam. But sadly, and this is the paradoxical part for people who may not follow these things so closely, but it's not rational, is that the human rights groups, not all of them, but the radical left human rights groups like Amnesty International, which have this very bizarre, irrational alliance, the Red-Green Alliance. Jeremy Corbyn, who was the head of the Labour Party and is on the radical left wing, he said the Hamas and Hezbollah, he said, our friends from Hamas and Hezbollah. And if you sit at the Human Rights Council and you hear the speech from Amnesty International, and then you hear the speech from Iran, if they're talking about Israel, it's the same speech. I challenge someone to identify, I can do a game of Iran or Amnesty International. Yeah. When the subject is Israel, you wouldn't know. If I give the text, if I give you the text of the speech, Iran will be saying Israel's committing war crimes and apartheid and genocide. Yeah. Amnesty International, just sponsored in Stockholm, huge banner. In Swedish, it says Mord Volk, which is killing the people, genocide.
Unfortunately, it could be Lula also.
Could be Lula also. I understand that in February 2024, he spoke at the African Summit in Ethiopia, and he said what Israel is doing is like what Hitler did to the Jews, which is obscene, shocking, and is a textbook definition of hatred against Jews. And it's a lie. It's a lie because on October 7th, Hamas attacked Israel. There was a ceasefire in place for several years. Hamas invaded Israel. In one day, slaughtered 1,200 Jews, the worst anti-Semitic attack since the Holocaust. And Israel had a duty to defeat Hamas, and that's called self-defense. And what Lula said is an inversion of what happened on October 7th.
Do that this year.
Looking worldwide, do you see in any country that the Human Rights Council is doing a good job protecting human rights?
From time to time. From time to time, if the United States and the European countries and Canada and Australia, when they mobilize, and if there isn't sufficient resistance from the dictatorships, then on rare occasions they can take action. So North Korea is an example. North Korea has very few allies. China protects them a little bit, but at the United Nations they don't want to say too much. So when a resolution is brought on North Korea, it happens once a year, it passes. On Iran, for several years there was nothing, but began to be some action, and they can pass a resolution on Iran. Syria, there were a few resolutions. So here and there, a few countries can be addressed, but most of the world's worst abusers get a free pass. There has been 0 resolutions, 0 commissions of inquiry, 0 monitors, special rapporteurs appointed on China, 1.5 billion people. Pakistan, very large country where Muslim minorities get persecuted, Christians get persecuted. A woman can have acid thrown on her face, and the government allows these kinds of radical Islamic attacks. Pakistan has never been addressed. Egypt has thousands of political prisoners, never been addressed. Cuba is a police state. Young protesters were thrown into prison. There may be hundreds of political prisoners, young people, 0 resolutions. The majority of countries of worst abusers are never addressed.
But simply passing a resolution can have an effect on the ground?
Yes and no. First, the no. The no is that the Human Rights Council has no real budgets. They don't have money to throw. They don't have the power of the sword. They can't send troops on the ground. So if you're asking immediate impact, no. No immediate impact. However, words have power. And those of us around this room, those of us, the audience who is listening, know that words have power. Thoughts are father to words, and words are father to deeds. It turns out, actually, that the dictatorships work very hard so that no words are said about them. Because when the Human Rights Council, the United Nations, when they speak, these words go around the world and they do affect legitimacy. Precisely those countries, those regimes that have 0 legitimacy because they are unelected, they are the most nervous, anxious, concerned that anyone will call out and expose their illegitimacy. So were the United Nations, if the United Nations were to say, Xi Jinping has never been elected, he oppresses 1.5 billion people, he's crushed the Tibetans, destroyed their temples, and a Tibetan girl lifts the flag of the Dalai Lama, they throw her in prison and abuse her. 1 million Muslim Uyghurs are thrown into camps, their beards cut off, their language and religion destroyed. Hong Kong, a beacon of democracy in Asia, extinguished in the past few years. Newspaper owner Jimmy Lai, in his 70s, a Christian, serious, principled man, very wealthy, could have left Hong Kong, said, I'm staying on the ship. I'm staying on the ship. And he's sitting in prison in his late 70s in a solitary confinement. This China is afraid that if there be one word said at the United Nations, it could shake things. Of course, their people are brainwashed. Their people don't get to see discussions like we're having now. They don't know what happened at Tiananmen Square. But if the United Nations were to say something, it has a ripple effect. And so they invest enormous amount of capital, diplomatic resources, economic resources, to push that no resolution will ever happen, no commission of inquiry, no special rapporteur appointed, because if there were such a thing, it can build a movement. Why did Iran send assassins to go and kill a small woman, physical stature, not in moral stature, named Masih Alinejad? She's a journalist, a women's rights activist, living in Brooklyn, New York, grew up in Iran, grew up in a very religious upbringing, Islamic, in a small town in Iran, where from the age of 7, you're obliged to hide your hair with a hijab. Yeah. She could never feel the wind in her hair. And as she became older, she began to speak out. She was a journalist. She was told, you have to go into exile. It's too dangerous, because she's asking questions about the regime. And she became, in exile in London, in New York, the leading women's rights activist for Iran, encouraging women to go in the countryside, take off the hijab, be free. And she sparked a movement. She had 1 million followers on the internet, called the My Stealthy Freedom Facebook page and other platforms. And the movement she sparked became the Women Life Freedom Movement. Of course, it was in reaction immediately. The proximate cause was Mahsa Amini, a young Kurdish Iranian woman who came to Tehran, was wearing a hijab, but had improper hijab, wasn't 100%. They arrested her, she was beaten, and she died in prison. That sparked a movement, but Masih Alinejad was really the force behind it. The Iranian regime, 2 years ago, sent assassins, hired assassins. I think they got $500,000. It was, I think they were Azerbaijani criminal gang of professional hitmen, went to Brooklyn, one guy with a Kalashnikov in his car, with instructions on where to find her house. They were surveilling her for, I don't know, months. And I was just in New York 2 weeks ago at the trial in downtown New York, Lower Manhattan, where I saw the assassin and in the courtroom. And I was there when they swore in the jury. And after 2 weeks of the trial, they were convicted. Convicted for trying to assassinate Masih Alinejad. Why did they try to kill this little woman? She has no guns. She has no tanks. There's a story. I'm giving you a long answer, but I think it's important.
That's
then I'll
great.
stop. Yeah.
We love the long answers.
Good. We're in a podcast. This is I only get 90 seconds at the UN. Here we can talk about deeper things.
Of course.
Yeah. So there's a quote. It may be apocryphal. Maybe the quote never happened, but it could have happened. Stalin was reportedly told, "Did you hear you've been criticized by the Pope?" And Stalin's response was, "The Pope? And how many divisions does he have? How many military divisions does he have? Why do I care about the Pope?" Well, actually, we know Pope John Paul, his words helped bring down the Soviet Union and others. And Masih Alinejad, how many divisions does she have? This little woman with nice curly hair and a magnificent voice and a brilliant mind. She has no divisions. She has no divisions. And yet the Iranian regime repeatedly has sent assassins to kill her. One in another operation, also intercepted by the Americans, they sent a team that was going to kidnap her, bring her from New York in a speedboat to Venezuela, and from Venezuela, bring her to Iran. In another operation, they tried to get her family to lure her into the region where they would kidnap her. They put her brother in prison for a couple of years to punish her. Her words are shaking the regime. And so words, if used properly, when the United Nations is working properly, they could use words to shake the regime of Xi Jinping, to shake the Ayatollahs. Sadly, too often, they do the opposite. China is elected always to the Human Rights Council. When America, 2-3 years ago, tried to bring a resolution about the Uyghurs, it was shot down, it was voted down. And the Islamic regime in Iran was made a member of the Women's Rights Commission. We led the campaign to reverse it. First, they laughed at us around the world. It was in the news, but people said, there's no procedure. How can you remove Iran? There's no procedure. I said, I used to be a lawyer. And based on my profound legal knowledge, the same body that elected them can unelect them. The 54-nation Economic and Social Council, one of the key organs of the United Nations, that's the body that elects. Actually, they're having elections today. Don't know, but they elect the members of the different commissions. Not the Human Rights Council anymore, they used to, but to the Commission on the Status of Women, the Commission Against Crime, different commissions. It's the 54-nation Economic and Social Council. I said, the same body that met and elected Iran to this body can meet and say, we hereby end, terminate. So I, using my profound legal knowledge, I drafted a resolution of, a few paragraphs, whereas Iran was elected to the Commission on the Status of Women, whereas Iran is currently beating, blinding, torturing, poisoning, and raping women who dare to stand up for their human rights, whereas we hereby terminate the membership of the Islamic Republic of Iran on the Commission on the Status of Women. I drafted it. Initially, it went nowhere. We're talking 2021. This was the Biden administration. They said, they didn't say this, but they were asked in a press conference, do you condemn the election of Iran? And the spokesman in the State Department said, look, it's true that sometimes some governments get elected that we don't agree with, and it's not very nice. Well, the journalist said, I'm asking you, yesterday they elected the Islamic Republic of Iran to the Women's Rights Commission. Do you condemn this? Listen, sometimes certain countries, vague, why? The Biden administration was trying to negotiate a new nuclear deal with Iran. And they didn't want to make trouble, so they didn't say anything. But when the Women Life Freedom movement happened, mass protests, thousands shot at, injured, arrested, killed, beaten, raped in prison, it changed, and the United States picked up this campaign and wrote a draft. They convened the Economic and Social Council in an emergency meeting that never happened before. And if I'm not mistaken, December 2022, America put in a resolution saying, we hereby terminate the membership. Iran objected. Russia said, you can't do this. There's no procedure. It passed. Iran was removed.
Great answer. Let's talk a little bit about Gaza. A few minutes ago, you used the word brainwash. Do you think it is what UN's agency in Gaza, UNRWA, does with the people, with the Palestinians there?
Sadly, yes. UNRWA began with noble intentions. The Americans were one of the founders, with France and others, of UNRWA, the UN Relief and Works Agency. The initial goal was to be noble. There was a war in 1948. The UN voted on November 29th, 1947, to partition what was British mandatory Palestine into two states, a Jewish state and an Arab state. And the Jews rejoiced. They danced that night, the night of November 29th in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem. For the first time in 2,000 years, the Jewish people would suddenly have sovereignty, independence, self-determination again. And this is right after the Holocaust, where Jews had nowhere to escape to. The world was divided into two parts, place where Jews could not live and places where Jews could not go to. And now there would be a state of Israel where Jews could finally have a home and to express their identity, their culture, their values, their history in a national sovereign way. And the Arabs declared war. They said, no, we're not. There's no partition. There is no Jewish state on 1 centimeter. Not 1 centimeter of Islamic land can be a Jewish state. And so they declared war. 5 Arab nations invaded the moment the British left in May 1948. Immediately, 5 Arab nations, Egypt from the south, which came up almost into Jerusalem, into the outskirts of Jerusalem. Egypt, the army came. Syria invaded. Jordan, with Iraqi help, and the other Arab states were helping them. And they lost. They managed to kill 6,000 Jews, which was 1% of the Jewish population at the time. But they lost. And hundreds of thousands of Arabs were displaced in the war. They wound up in Syria, Jordan, Lebanon. And UNRWA was supposed to help them. America said, let's help them start a new life. It was a very easy thing to accomplish if there was a will. The Arabs who were living in northern Palestine went a little bit north, maybe 50 miles north, in Lebanon. It's the same language, Arabic, the same religion, Islam, the same culture, very easy to integrate and start a new life. The same in Jordan and Syria. But they said no. If we agree that we are starting a new life, it means we accept the war is over and we accept the Jewish state. We cannot accept this. The jihad that was declared is still on. So we do not accept that we have a new life. Anyone who builds something permanent for us, we refuse to accept. We are going back, and there is no Jewish state. And the Americans realized that it was failing. They brought in the head of the Tennessee Valley Development Authority, who had redeveloped millions of people in America in a huge area, to do the same for the Palestinian Arabs, but they refused. They said they're only temporary and they're going to go back. And then the UNRWA became pathological. Instead of UNHCR, right next to my office in Geneva, which is dedicated to resettling refugees, you were a refugee in Syria, we find you a home in Canada, in Sweden, you have a new home, a new life. Refugees from Sudan, refugees from Ukraine, the mission of UNHCR, the High Commission of Refugees, is to resettle you so you are no longer a refugee. UNRWA is the opposite, which doesn't make any sense, but UNRWA is the opposite. After 70 years of receiving more than $7 billion, primarily Western donors, the United States, Germany, France, Sweden, Canada, Australia, primarily Western donors, not a single Palestinian has been resettled. The opposite, which you asked me. In school, they are taught, schools in Gaza, schools in Lebanon, schools in Jordan, they are taught they have a right of return, which sounds lovely, rights must be good. But in their language, that is translated to violence. And what happened on October 7th for them is exercising their right of return, killing Israelis to dismantle Israel. And we're paying for it.
Just explaining, schools that are run by UNRWA, right?
Yes.
by the United Nations.
Yes.
Is UNRWA still doing any job in the Gaza Strip, and are there discussions to replace it?
Yes. So first of all, talk about the schools and the discussion. So the schools, there's a debate. UNRWA says, no, it's not true. We teach them universal human rights, UN values. Well, they say, some groups say, well, look at the textbooks. They use the local textbooks, which could be a Syrian textbook. It could be the PLO Palestinian textbook. And they have a lot of incitement. They have pictures of terrorists. They could be learning mathematics or something. And the examples are about how to kill Israelis, things like that, or celebrating famous terrorists. And there's a big debate about the textbooks. My organization, UN Watch, we did not look at the textbooks. We looked at who are the teachers.
What do they post on social media, right?
Who are the teachers? And how do I know the teachers? Like you said, I'm sitting in Geneva. I type in UNRWA on Facebook, and you see the guy says, I work for UNRWA. So it pops up. And you click on his page, and you see that pictures of him or her with the students in their school in Gaza, in Lebanon. And you understand who their life is. No hacking, just tapping in. And you see Elham Mansour, teacher. She says, I work for UNRWA. You see her with the students, and you see her posting, by Allah, we must slaughter all the Jews and all the Israelis. This is the obligation. In the name of Allah, every Muslim must do it. And she's a teacher. The textbook might be the Constitution of Brazil. The textbook might be the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The textbook might be the Ten Commandments. But if the teacher is Elham Mansour, I know what the students are learning and what their message is. The teacher who was the head of all the teachers, the head of the teachers union, his name is Fathi Sharif. He was a teacher. He was the principal of a major school outside of Tyre, Lebanon. And he was head of the teachers union of 2,000 teachers. We went on his Facebook page. For the past 10 years, every second day, he posts a picture of Hamas terror attacks saying, Allahu Akbar. God is great. This is amazing. He posts pictures of the founders of Hamas, like Sheikh Hassan Youssef. He posts pictures on other community websites. They have a community website. When he makes a wedding for his sons, he made 2 weddings, they celebrate, and in the front row are the leaders of Hamas and the Jihad. And they're all taking pictures with him. So clearly he's some kind of Hamas figure. And we sent in to the UN the dossier, 100 pages. And they said, yeah, it's true. Last year, Israel made a complaint. And apparently Israel made a complaint, and he was suspended, not fired. And so the UN said, we took action. I said, no. For 10 years, at least, he was posting about this. You didn't do anything. You gave him a certificate of appreciation. The director of UNRWA in Lebanon, whose name is an Italian name. He was the head of Amnesty International for a period in London. I'm forgetting his name. Claudio Cordone was the director of UNRWA, former acting director of Amnesty International, then was the head of UNRWA in Lebanon. He's shaking hands with Fathi Sharif, giving him a certificate, wallah, a certificate of appreciation. Even though every day he's posting on Facebook, and his Facebook friends are all UNRWA people, that he's supporting Hamas. So UNRWA said, yeah, we suspended him. He said, no, you have to fire him. They wouldn't fire him. Actually, thousands of UNRWA staff made a strike for months. From February, March 2024 until the end of May, UNRWA teachers were striking, saying the great patriot, Fathi Sharif, they suspended him. This is wrong. So they shut down UNRWA. Philippe Lazzarini, the head of UNRWA, flew to Beirut in the end of May 2024. He met with the Prime Minister of Lebanon. He said, you have to help me. The protesters, but the protesters were not Fatah. That's the secular faction that runs the Palestinian Authority under Mahmoud Abbas. They didn't call the strike. The strike was called by a group of the hardline groups, Hamas, the Jihad, the Islamic Jihad, and other groups. They called the strike. And Mr. Lazzarini told the Lebanese Prime Minister, please help me. They're shutting down UNRWA in Lebanon, the schools, the clinics. And then he had a meeting with the hardline factions, with Hamas, Islamic Jihad. On June 1st, they put out a statement, and they said, we met with Mr. Lazzarini, and he promised us that things will be okay with Mr. Fathi Sharif. There will be a satisfactory result, and therefore, the strike is over. Beginning on Monday, June 3rd, we hereby declare the strike is over. And Lazzarini says, no, he was asked by a journalist. He said, no, I told them stop. But that's not what they wrote. They wrote, he promised us there will be a satisfactory result. Indeed, he was never fired. And in the end of September, Fathi Sharif justice was delivered to him on his second floor apartment. A missile entered, an IDF missile, right into his apartment, and he was eliminated from this world, and he went up to Islamic heaven. And on that day, Hamas declared, Israel killed our leader. What? Hamas declared that Fathi Sharif, we knew he was some kind of official, but they said he was our leader. And they said he was a great man. They put videos of him meeting Ismail Haniyeh, the former leader of Hamas, who also went to heaven when he was eliminated in Tehran, when he was visiting in a villa. He was eliminated by Israel. They said Fathi Sharif was the leader of Hamas. So we learn that the head of UNRWA Teachers Union was the head of Hamas. Philippe Lazzarini was asked, he said, oh, I didn't know. He didn't know, but he was posting every second day. We have a report coming out. I actually have it in my bag. I didn't, but it's fine. It'll come out in a few weeks with the whole story of Fathi Sharif. We've already put some on our website, unwatch.org, but we're going to have a 250-page report on Fathi Sharif and the fact that even though he's been eliminated, his acolytes from Hamas are still in place running the teachers union. Copy-paste, same in Gaza. The head of the entire staff union was Su'ail al-Hindi, an elected member of the Hamas Politburo. He's he was the chair of the protests, the riots, the violent riots that Hamas did leading up to, you may remember, for about 4 or 5 years, every Friday they would go up to the fence, to the border fence with Israel, and they would riot and throw rocks and gunshots, and Israel was responding, shooting at them. This was going on for several years. And this was kind of their way of precursor to October 7th. You'd go up to the border fence and you have thousands, so you see where the cameras are, how does Israel respond. Over several years, Hamas developed enormous amount of intelligence of how the fence worked. Su'ail al-Hindi, the former UNRWA teacher for 29 years, school principal, head of the entire staff union, he was the chair of these March of Return protests, and today he's a leading Hamas spokesman, now based out of Turkey. He's interviewed in the media. Hamas spokesman, he was the head of UNRWA in Gaza of the union.
But now we have a different situation there because Palestinians are protesting against Hamas. And you talked about this in UN meeting at the Human Rights Council. You said that people were ignoring this.
Yes.
They are not worried about the Palestinians. How do you describe what's happening there? Because of Israel reaction, people are noticing that they can't speak now because Hamas is weak, but there is retaliation.
Yes, it was shocking. It was March 26th, so last week. I was speaking at the United Nations Human Rights Council, and I can see on the screen in Gaza, they're shouting, down Hamas out. And we put the video, and I think you reproduced it on your website, of a split screen. In Gaza, on the ground, on that same day, thousands are marching in Beit Lahia, in Shujaiya, in Gaza City, saying down with Hamas, which they hadn't done very much because you get crushed. But as Hamas is weaker, and as they're suffering, because Hamas refuses to end the war, if Hamas surrenders today, releases more than 50 hostages who are being tortured, humiliated, abused, starved, the war ends. But Hamas does not want the war to end, and they want to keep torturing the hostages. And people in Gaza say enough. Now, do these people in Gaza love Israel? No. If Hamas was winning, would they say anything? I don't know. You know, the Germans at 1945, at some point, when you lose and you're starved, then you speak out and you denounce. But until then, you know, I don't think they're necessarily lovers of Zion, these protesters, but I give them credit because, as you said, Hamas is beginning to retaliate. There was a story in the Free Press about one of the leaders of these anti-Hamas protests that they killed him. They mutilated his body and threw him off a roof with a note saying, this is what happens to anyone who dares to defy Hamas.
Odai Nasser al something.
Yeah.
It's Odai the name.
Yeah, but it's a very...
22 years old.
A very interesting development, and the world didn't seem to care. The international community, the United Nations, all they did was attack Israel. So on the ground in Gaza, out with Hamas. Hamas is ruining our lives. In the United Nations, Israel's committing crimes, condemn Israel, one country after another after another. And that's why I said, indeed, I recalled what I had said in 2014. This is not a council that is pro-human rights. You claim to speak in the name of human rights, but actually the human rights of Gazans, you don't care about. The human rights of Muslims in China, you don't care about. The human rights of Muslim minorities in Pakistan, you don't care about. You don't care about human rights. You don't even care about Muslims. You don't even care about Palestinians in Gaza. You only care if you can blame Israel. You're not pro-human rights. You're anti-Israel.
Yeah, it's precise. Duda.
Hello, you are against the reappointment of Francesca Albanese to the Human Rights Council, right? Can you explain who she is and why you are against a new term for her?
Sure. So the Human Rights Council is a body of 47 member states. Every other country is in the room. They just don't vote. They speak, they debate, they can introduce a text, but they don't vote. Brazil is one of the 47 members. So that's the Human Rights Council. 47 members. They meet, they discuss, they debate, they adopt resolutions. As we discussed, the resolutions don't impact immediately on the ground, but over time, they can have an impact on our culture. They can grant international legitimacy in a good way or in a bad way. The case of Albanese is a case of international legitimacy being used in a bad way. Someone who has said statements like, when there was the Bataclan terrorist attack in Paris in 2015, on her Facebook page, Francesca Albanese, who is a legal academic who grew up in Italy in a small town outside of Napoli called Ariano Irpino in the province of Avellino. And she grew up and she worked for UNRWA, surprise, surprise, for 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. And she hates Israel. And she says it openly. Israel is the worst country in the world, and anything you can imagine, you can blame on Israel. When there were fires in Los Angeles recently, she found a way to blame Israel. I don't remember what the connection was, but somehow she said, yeah, it's because of this and that, and therefore Israel's guilty. So, it's like in the Islamic world, people will tell you. My friend Louay Ahmed, who grew up in Yemen, who spoke for us at the Human Rights Council several weeks ago, he asked, I see the flag of Palestine. Where's the flag of Yemen? 500,000 of my people are starving and have no food, and the Houthis are spending our money to attack Israel thousands of miles away. Where's the flag of Yemen and where's the flag of Syria? Louay Ahmed told me, he said, in Yemen, we were taught in the mosque that anything bad that's happening to you, it's blaming it on the Jews. And we know in Somalia from Ayaan Hirsi Ali, the brilliant and courageous Somali lady who made her way to the Netherlands, managed to become an elected member of parliament in the Netherlands, and they didn't like her because she dared to call out the radicalism of fanatical Islam. She made them uncomfortable, and she had to leave the Netherlands, move to America. I don't know if she lives in America now or the UK, but a courageous woman. When I heard her speak, she once spoke to the American Jewish Committee annual conference in 2006, and she said this. This is a tall, elegant, black Somali woman. She said, I have to apologize to you. I never met you, but I have to apologize to you. Why? Because I was taught, growing up in Somalia, when we didn't have water in the village, the Jews destroyed our water. If we didn't have electricity, the Jews. And that's how she brought up. Francesca Albanese is someone of this category. So she has said, when the Bataclan terrorist attack happened by ISIS, she said she shared an article saying that the Mossad and Israel were somehow behind it. She announced on her Facebook page in 2014, there was a war we talked about it, the war between Israel and Hamas. She wrote to her town priest, actually he's sort of the acting bishop. His name is Antonio Blundo, her family's priest. And she wrote, Caro Don Antonio, dear Don Antonio, Israel is killing the Palestinians. It's horrible, da-da-da-da-da. And America is subjugated by the Jewish lobby. So the Jewish lobby is subjugating America, and Europe is subjugated by Holocaust guilt. So these are openly classical anti-Semitic motifs. The Jews control America. That's what Hitler was always saying. The Jews control Churchill. The Jews control Roosevelt. And she was appointed as a UN expert. The international legitimacy was obscenely given to this kind of a person. And she's used it in the past 3 years. Her title is Special Rapporteur on Palestine, which means an investigator. Her job is to investigate Israel's violations. So even the job itself has guilt presumed in advance. Mm-hmm. There are 15 other monitors on countries. There's one on North Korea. There's one on Haiti. Mm-hmm. It's to look at the human rights situation. Sometimes in Sudan, they had our special rapporteur The regime is doing terrible things. Sometimes the rebels do terrible things. Her mandate from the Human Rights Council, written in February 1993, it's inherited from the old Human Rights Commission, is to investigate, not human rights, but to investigate Israel's violations. That's the mandate. And they picked someone who is obsessed with comparing Israelis to Nazis, which sadly your president did the same, but she's obsessed with doing this. And they deliberately chose her. And in the past 3 years, she repeatedly says the Palestinian violence, they have no choice. They have no choice, which to me is the most racist thing. When you don't give people agency, when you say someone who's poor or is a particular ethnic thing, and because of who they are, they have no choice. They must be violent. That, to me, is racist. We are individual human beings endowed with intelligence and agency. And Palestinians don't have to choose violence. And I met Rami Aman from Gaza, who said, I want peace with Israelis. I have complaints, but I want peace with Israelis. Hamas threw him in prison. There's a choice. But she is empowering Hamas. So she said repeatedly, from the day she was appointed, she took office on May 1, 2022, she said, Palestinian violence is inevitable. They have no choice. She told a Hamas conference, you have the right to resist. November 2022, a year before the massacre, you have the right to resist. She's wearing the crown of a UN expert.
Yeah, we call it moral legitimation of the crime. Yeah. You use the word category. Which one's the Antonio Guterres category? Because he comes from Portugal's Socialist Party. Is he the same as Albanese? What's different? Because he also demonized Israel, right?
He did. Certainly after October 7th, he is worse than ever before. Only a few weeks after the massacre, he told the United Nations, yes, I condemn Hamas, yes. But, he said, these attacks did not happen in a vacuum. And he went on to enumerate one alleged Palestinian grievance after another, effectively saying they had no choice. It's a natural reaction. Israel provoked it. They brought it upon themselves, which is a horrific thing to say. And part of what he said is true. Hamas attacks did not happen in a vacuum. Nothing happens in a vacuum. You and I, we woke up today and we went about our business. Nothing we said or did came in a vacuum. We're influenced by our friends, our family, our environment, our education. Had Mr. Guterres said, nothing happens in a vacuum, why did thousands of Palestinian Hamas Nukba terrorists invade Israel, break the ceasefire, go into communities that are farmer communities, kibbutzim, which are sort of communes, which are on the left, very peace-oriented. These are the activists who live in these kibbutzim, these old ladies who would go to the border with Gaza, bring Gazans into Tel Aviv hospitals to help them. Why did thousands of Hamas terrorists and Gazan civilians from Gaza cross over into Israel, massacre families in front of other family members, wearing a GoPro, do the most horrific atrocities? Why did they do that? What schools did they go to? What schools did they go to? According to Johan Soufi, I debated him on France Info in Paris in March of last year, a year ago, and he told me, he said 90% of Gazans went to UNRWA schools. 90% of Gazans are graduates of UNRWA schools. Nothing happens in a vacuum. Where did they go to school, Mr. Guterres? Your schools, Mr. Guterres. You taught them. You taught them. Where is your home? We see this on video. Where is your home, they ask the Palestinian child. In Gaza? La. No, not in Gaza. Where? In Haifa, in Tel Aviv. That's my home. So when they were given billions of dollars in cement to build homes, hospitals, and schools, they were taught in UN schools, in Mr. Guterres' schools, that their home is there in Israel. So they used the cement to build hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of kilometers of terror tunnels. All what they learned from UN schools.
Do you see any similarities between the conflict in Gaza and in Ukraine and the repercussion about it?
Well, what we see is a unprovoked assault. On one day, suddenly, Mr. Putin took masses of Russian armor and troops and invaded Ukraine, violating international law. Hamas suddenly one day, armed and trained by Islamic Republic of Iran, acting in concert with Hezbollah, which of course attacked the day after on October 8th, suddenly invaded Israel and sent rockets killing Israelis, and Vladimir Putin does the same. We don't see the identical level of atrocity, of horrific torturing to the same level that Hamas did, but obviously we're seeing massive killing by Russia, massive killing by Iranian-trained Hamas, and of course Iran and Russia work together. Iran is also arming Russia, sending them drones, which are become a very important part of the Russian arsenal. Certainly that we see. In terms of the world reaction, we don't see the same world reaction. Many people in liberal America suddenly became kind of almost Churchillian, or certainly like Roosevelt. They said this is a just war, we must defeat Russia, and many journalists in America and activists put the Ukrainian flag in their profile. Not so many people are putting the Israeli flag in their profile, even though this is equally a just war and facing assault on all sides, and that's something that's unfortunate. Not as many people recognize the just war that Israel is fighting against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, the Islamic regime in Iran, the Shiite militias in Iraq. This is a just war, and the West, as they stand with Ukraine, should be standing with Israel.
Hillel, how do you see the declarations of Lula about the Ukraine war or the war between Israel and Hamas? And do you think it matters for the rest of the world?
Why don't you remind your audience of some of these statements? That would be useful.
Lula said it was a genocide happening in the Gaza Strip.
Yes.
And that Volodymyr Zelensky, he wanted the war, right? Or he doesn't want to end the war, right? No.
He also accused Israel of ethnic cleaning.
Yes, cleansing, yeah.
Cleansing,
yeah. So he's spouting the Hamas propaganda and the Vladimir Putin propaganda.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, look, we'd expect Brazil's an important country. It's a leading country in South America. It has an impact on the world. People look to it as a voice from the global South, and we expect them to stand up for victims, whether it's the hundreds of Israelis who were taken from their homes, whether little babies or Holocaust survivor grandparents, thrown into the dungeons of Gaza. You'd expect someone who claims to speak for the people, for the downtrodden, to identify with them. You'd expect him to identify with the victims in Ukraine, and not doing so is betraying the social cause that he claims to speak for. And that's something that should be condemned by everyone. And I hope the people of Brazil recognize that.
Do you see any difference about Biden government and Trump government in relation with Israel?
With Israel, yes, there is a difference. I mean, Biden had mixed messages. His initial reaction after the war was incredible. 100% moral clarity. He flew to Israel. He said there are times in this world when pure, unadulterated evil is unleashed upon this world. That is what Hamas did. And his initial reaction, he embraced Israel. He sent in aircraft carriers to the region to deter Hezbollah and Iran, and that was incredible. Over time, however, we saw different actions. Yes, the United States continued to send arms to Israel to defend itself, but always with caveats. At various times, they slowed down the arms. At various times, they said Israel shouldn't do this. They told Israel, don't go into Gaza. Don't go into Rafah. Rafah was where Yahya Sinwar was. To win a war, you have to defeat the morale of that country. And as long as Yahya Sinwar was alive, they had the morale. When he was killed, it was a game changer. Hamas is still there. They're still a threat. They're still tragically holding the hostages, torturing them. But the people of Gaza understood that Hamas was defeated, and in part that Israel had to go into Rafah. Israel, you can't win a war if you're not on the ground. Israel thought wrongly that they could use their air force and do brilliant attacks, but Hamas was all underground. They were in their bunkers, deep underground, and there was no way to root them out if you don't go in. And Biden kept saying, don't go in, don't go in. And Israel said, well, we don't have a choice.
It was a huge campaign, a world campaign.
All eyes on Rafah.
On Rafah.
Very orchestrated.
Yeah.
Very orchestrated. Activists, media, campus. And Biden, their message was, don't go in. And Israel understood. They don't want to kill civilians. Hamas is trying to get them to kill civilians. Hamas is embedding themselves under the hospitals, in the homes, in the schools, in the basement of the hospitals. And Israel said the only way we can do it is we say we're going to go into that region. All civilians, please leave. And whoever is there will be a Hamas terrorist. And the international community, Amnesty International, said ethnic cleansing. Ethnic cleansing? Did anyone tell the people, the Israelis on the border with Gaza who were attacked in the kibbutzim and the different places, we're going to attack, please leave. No one told them that. That would be a dream if they had said, leave, go somewhere else. They would have left. But Israel was telling them to leave so they could go after Hamas. And Biden, at repeated occasions, told Israel not to do it. They didn't listen, and thankfully, they were able to achieve a lot by going in. Same in Lebanon, said don't go in. So again, was Biden anti-Israel? No. He was a Zionist, he was pro-Israel, but the people around him on the left were feeling the pressure. They were about to have an election. He was told, they're not going to show up at the ballot. In Michigan are all these Arab voters. You're losing Michigan. And his experts told him, you need to criticize Israel. One time he left, he was going for the weekend, and he appeared in front of the camera, and he's holding a big book. It's a book by Rashid Khalidi, some kind of anti-Israel book. And it was obvious, a signal, I'm with you. Kamala Harris was asked about the protesters, and she said, they have a point. So all these signals were being sent at various points that undermined the support for Israel. So yes, he supported Israel, but there were these counter messages. So far from Trump, mostly you get 100% support. Israel has the right to destroy Hamas. Israel has the right to fight back against Iran. That's the general message. It's not perfect. We have his envoy, Steve Witkoff, going to the Qataris, saying we like the Qataris. So, it's I wouldn't give Trump administration perfect points when it comes to Israel, but certainly the general message is we have your back, and if you need to go after these horrible terrorists, you have our back. And I hope that President Trump will live up to it.
And what do you think it's going to happen in Gaza? Because Benjamin Netanyahu was criticized for having no plan about Gaza. Do you know what's going to happen there?
We don't know, and it's hard to make a plan when you have a nihilistic death cult controlling it. And, what happened, after the war, first you need to defeat them. That's clear. I mean, you ask, what happens to Germany after the Nazis? First you need to defeat them. Then you could see what comes next. And the problem is that, people say, well, maybe some peacekeepers will come in. President Trump said he would take it over. Well, he said that, but he didn't mean it sincerely. He's not wrong when he says that Gaza could be a Riviera. It could be. Gaza has beautiful beaches. I was there many years ago. It's white sand, like these dunes of white sand, and it can easily be the French Riviera. It can easily be Tel Aviv, the beautiful Tel Aviv beaches. They have it and more. It's just downstream. It's like an hour down the coast. But Hamas turned it into a factory of death. Instead of acting like Dubai, where they build up into the sky, into the future, Hamas is building down hundreds of kilometers of terror tunnels into hell. So what will happen with Gaza? American peacekeepers are not going to go in. No American soldiers are going to die in Gaza, and Israel doesn't want them to fight their wars for them. Doesn't want Americans to die for Israel. The Israeli soldiers are willing to die for their country. No Arab from the Emirates or from Saudi is going to risk their lives policing Hamas. Will some of them come in if Hamas is completely disarmed? Maybe. So the short answer is we don't know yet. At the end of the day, we want Palestinians to govern themselves, building towards the future. Gaza could be a beautiful region with millions of tourists. It's up to them. So first thing is Hamas has to be defeated. The hostages have to be released. And then, these protests give some hope. Some people are saying we don't like Hamas. Some people are saying it. Give some hope.
Just a few more questions, Duda.
Are there also difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump regarding human rights, or how the U.S. is acting in Geneva, for example?
I'm sorry, could you ask again?
Are there difference between how Joe Biden and Donald Trump treats human rights issues?
Yes, there's a very big difference. There's a very big difference. I mean, we're two different worldviews. Mm-hmm. The worldview of Biden's administration was a progressive worldview that, the good part was wanting to intervene on human rights situations, whether it's in Iran, whether it's in Russia. The U.S. was very upfront in confronting Vladimir Putin together with the EU. That was great. And they were outspoken on human rights issues in China and in other countries.
Which Trump is not actually doing, right?
No.
Confront Putin.
No. So certainly, if you talk about Russia, Russia is a particular case where his attitude his attitude is the complete opposite. Trump, Biden administration fully supported Zelensky, certainly in their language. Zelensky complained. He said, "You didn't give us, you gave us enough to keep going, but not enough to win the war." Okay, Trump, we saw it visibly in the White House.
Yeah.
He fought Zelensky, and before he came, said he's acting like a dictator. So there's complete different attitude. And Trump says in his defense that he's trying to make peace, and therefore this is how to do it. We have to see. But I'm someone who works closely with Russian political prisoners who just got out. My friend Vladimir Kara-Murza was thrown into the Gulag, solitary confinement, was left to die. By a miracle in August, he got out in a prisoner swap. So a journalist, won the Pulitzer Prize, filmmaker, historian, amazing person.
Yeah.
So when I see,
his question about the different
on human rights.
regarding human rights.
Yeah, so putting Russia aside, it's a bit of a special case, but you could say it might be emblematic. But Trump is isolationist. I mean, the MAGA movement says, as a general rule, I'm worried about America. I don't care what happens in the rest of the world. You can, in general, the message is, you do what you want. I'm not going to get involved. We'll get involved if our interests are at stake. That is generally the message. From time to time, I mean, Rubio is his Secretary of State, but of course that's not his past. That's not his worldview was more interventionist. You could say historically more neoconservative, that in the Republican movement, where America is leading in the world and is involved and is fighting against communism. And certainly Rubio has spoken out in the past on many human rights abuses. And recently he spoke out in favor of victims in different places. So we'll see. It could be that Secretary of State Rubio could temper the isolationist tendencies in the way that Nikki Haley did in the past. And I hope that's the case. I don't think isolationism is the right path. America first, sure, but for America to be who it is, should stand with the downtrodden around the world. Of course, not compromising America's interests, but America's interests will be affected if communism, dictatorship, oppression, radical Islam take over the world. America will be impacted. So they shouldn't be blind and should stay in the lead, and we still need the free world. And my concern is that Trump is attacking historic alliances, attacking my country, Canada. Some of it seems like a joke, but some of it doesn't. So I'm concerned that he's shaking alliances in a way that are unhelpful. I'm happy that the EU is being pressured to put more money into defense, and Trump is right on some of those things. But it should be to act in concert with the allies and have a strong alliance to push back against the dictatorships.
Yeah, and we are used here to listen to Marco Rubio's to see Rubio criticizing dictatorships because he is from a Latin family, so he always criticized Cuban dictatorship, Venezuela, and it's strange to see Marco Rubio in a government which is so soft with Putin, right? So last question. After October the 7th, 2023, we witnessed a rise of anti-Semitism around the world, and we have Jewish friends in Brazil, and they are worried about it. What would be your message for them? How can we do something in a country to anti-Semitism don't come back like what happened before the Holocaust?
Well, I think the message should be for the general community. Certainly the Jews are alarmed. We've seen in the past year and a half since October 7th a tsunami of anti-Semitism. My own country, Canada, where I grew up, was a wonderful country for Jews to grow up in. Yes, there was anti-Semitism here and there, but nothing substantial. What we've seen in the past year and a half, the Jewish school that my brothers went to was shot at twice within 1 week. The synagogue where I prayed on Shabbat, on Saturday, every week had a bullet found in their door. There have been fire bombings in Montreal, in Toronto. Also hundreds of thousands at various times of people, maybe that's too strong amount, but certainly thousands of people protesting on the streets in favor of Hamas. The demography has changed. There are now about 2 million Muslims. Some of them, not all, but some of them have been radicalized and support Hamas and Hezbollah, supported by radical left groups. They took over McGill University, where I went to. It's happening now again. These encampments where Jews are intimidated. They're told Zionists can't come here, which is another way of saying Jews can't go in certain places. And the mayors of Montreal and Toronto didn't really do anything, and the police were holding off. And the message from Justin Trudeau, who was prime minister until recently, was very hesitant in giving them signals. So that happened in the great country of Canada. Australia, very similar. The United States, also similar things with Columbia, Harvard, and people wearing keffiyehs looking like terrorists saying we support Hezbollah and Hamas. I understand that in Brazil you haven't had that kind of thing. You have a different demography. You haven't had that kind of immigration from Islamic states in your major cities. Maybe in the south you have some Shiites, maybe in the border area which are sympathetic to Hezbollah, but you haven't had these phenomena yet, and I hope you don't. But you do have a president who identifies with the radical left, identifies with their narrative, and we see that this is a virus that goes worldwide. I hope it doesn't infect Brazil the way it has in other countries and cities, but clearly it has infected the rhetoric of your president. It's very dangerous. And anti-Semitism is a problem that hurts Jews, but it also hurts the rest of society, a society that becomes scapegoating the Jews. Things do not go well. You know, we saw it with Germany. What began with anti-Semitism destroyed the country. We've seen it with other regimes over the time. It's a madness, a pathology that turns the country away from looking at its own problems. It's a way of saying, we're not going to look at our problems. We're going to find a traditional scapegoat, and that doesn't end well for anybody. So it's something that the general society of Brazil needs to make sure that they don't allow it to poison their society. And they should call out their president when he goes down that path, which he did when he made those horrible statements, and should step back from it and come back to a society that is about mutual respect and tolerance, and not going into historic pathologies that have not ended well for anyone.
Hillel Neuer, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your presence here. We are honored. We admire your work. You are brave there when you confront people in United Nations, the most hated man in United Nations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I just want to say, first of all, thank you to your agency for sharing some of our reports of what's happening at the United Nations, for interviewing me from time to time. It's very important. I know people in Brazil don't always have access to this information. Some of the media aren't always reporting this, so it's very important that your agency gives this information. I also want to thank the hosts that brought me here to Brazil. I came here to speak for a wonderful organization called Hillel International. Same name as me. We're both named after a great philosopher, rabbi who existed 2,000 years ago, who said, "That which is hateful unto you, do not do unto others." That is the whole Torah. Go and learn. So Hillel International is a group that helps Jewish students, that gives them education, it gives them programming, encourages a new leadership for the Jewish community for young students. And they celebrated their 20th anniversary in Rio de Janeiro, and I was invited to be the keynote speaker. I met terrific Jewish students who are committed to helping make Brazil a great country. And they launched here, Hillel International, in Sao Paulo. So I was here for that. All brought together by the wonderful Marcia Polisuk. So I'm really grateful to them for bringing me here.
Yeah, you'll be always welcome. We love to talk to you in English, although we are much more intelligent in Portuguese. A todos vocês que acompanharam o podcast OA, toda segunda-feira tem um episódio novo no canal de YouTube de O Antagonista, às 19h30. Lembrando que o Papo Antagonista, que eu e Duda Teixeira fazemos todos os dias, analisando as notícias de cada dia do Brasil e do mundo, é de segunda a sexta-feira, repito, das 18 às 19h30, na TV BMC e aqui também no canal de YouTube de O Antagonista. Um grande abraço a todos e até a próxima.
Podcast OA. Conversa boa de ver e ouvir.